Hello and welcome to Rewind Review.
A whole new world. State of...
A podcast where Chris likes to do that to your ears. I suspect in the edit I'm going to bring that down slightly, but I want everyone listening to know that I'm now officially deaf. So that's nice.
But only because of the volume, not the singing quality.
Both.
No, just volume only.
Okay.
The singing, I'd imagine, was pitch perfect.
Yep.
A whole new world. I like to cover as many keys as possible when I sing.
Yep. You do seem to enjoy that. Yeah, you're right. That's true.
Often not the right ones.
You like to skip out the right ones, which I think is really a really bold choice.
Yeah, if anything,
all the keys except the one you want.
Chris Billingham, all the keys except the right ones. Yeah. Sorry, Dan, you were saying. Carry on.
Well, we're talking about Aladdin. I mean, I think from the title of the podcast, I suspect listeners already are aware of this. But also, I think your singing has maybe clued them in. We're gonna do Aladdin. I don't know. This is an interesting one because I don't know, history-wise, this is like the most classic of classic Rewind reviews for me in terms of like, this story isn't really a story other than that I absolutely fell in love with this film as a child and ran a VHS tape of it into the ground to the point where I could recite the movie top to bottom for a time as a kid, and was sometimes asked by friends and sometimes asked in front of family, because my parents almost couldn't believe I'd committed the movie to memory, and they would say, do the thing, and they'd be more specific than that, but they would basically get a stick and sort of poke me at like family events and be like, oh, do the genie shows up in the cave, and I would do the whole scene, everyone's lines. Or they'd just be like, do the movie, and I'd just start the movie, and I'd do the whole movie. Well, they would never let me do the whole movie, because that would be ridiculous, but they could point to... God.
They looked at Dan doing the performance of the genie, wowing the crowd, and they thought, there's a kid who's going to make it as a performer. And now here we are, 20 years later, and you're talking about Aladdin on a YouTube video that's going to get about 57 views, my friend. Well done. Well done, buddy. You made it.
To be fair, Chris, I never said I was good.
Oh, they were all watching you going, fucking hell.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess the impressive part is that I knew the whole movie. That was always my assumption. Yeah. I can't imagine I was cracking out a great Robin Williams impression at the age of whatever I was, 6.
Then suddenly something about that is so much just inherently feels crueler. Look at him. He knows every fucking... No, keep going. No. Get the video up. Get the video up. Watch it. Compare. Like, that seems less fun for some reason.
I remember upsetting a neighbour kid when I did the bit, at the end when the genie's like, you're getting your wishes, so sit down. I did that bit and I did it really loud, and a neighbour kid cried.
Wow. If there's one thing people don't like, it's random surprise loud noises. Oh, new.
So yeah, suffice to say, this was. I mean, for a big chunk of my childhood, before Back to the Future and Star Wars sort of took their roles as like some of my favorite films when I was in my youth. I think I must have. I'm trying to. I was trying to figure out how old I was when I first saw this. 5 or 6, I think, based on the UK release date. And I don't know if I saw Back to the Future or Star Wars until 3 to 4 years later, maybe. I'm not sure. I can't remember exactly what the timeline is for some of these, but for a period of time, it was my favorite movie. And yeah, it was. I absolutely adored it for obvious reasons. It's got problems. I don't think we can sidestep the stereotyping and some of the issues. We'll come to that. But as a movie, I love this film, and I still love this film to this day. I watch it reasonably regularly. This was not a surprise. This is the first time, Chris, ever in Rewind Review's history where I've thought I could probably get away with not watching this film. I did. I stayed up late and watched it last night. But I probably didn't need to. So yeah, absolutely, yeah, a big part of my childhood. I believe, I mean, remembering correctly, you saw this quite late in life.
I have no idea. For the first time, I truly have no idea. Like I feel I've definitely seen it, but Aladdin's one of those osmosis films where you could just have seen clips or seen a stage show or seen someone do a play. I've seen the reboot, I know that for sure, and I have to say I actually quite enjoy the reboot. I think it's one of the better live action remakes.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So, I know I saw it. I cannot tell you when, how. I truly don't know.
So you haven't seen it recently then. So this was to some degree quite fresh for you.
The most recent thing I saw, so in this house, so that's putting us within 4 years. I saw the reboot. Like the Guy Ritchie version. So that's the most recent Aladdin media I've interacted with.
Interesting.
I went through a spate.
I also think that reboot was pretty good for what it is.
Yeah, I went through a spate of watching the live action reboots. Except I drew the line at Dumbo. I was like, you can watch that on your own. I have no interest in watching Tim Burton's Dumbo. Sorry.
No, that's fair. I think like, I don't want to spend too much time getting onto that reboot, but like, very quickly, I think it's worth just adding with that reboot. Like, as someone who loved that movie as a kid, I went very nervously into that reboot. But I think, like, especially considering it's helmed by Guy Ritchie, which I just thought that was such a mismatch of like director and content. I thought it was made with a lot of care and attention, a surprising amount of care and attention, and I thought the changes were necessary, mostly, and yeah, I while it wasn't as good as the original, I would actually give it some credit for stepping outside of the original, being braver with the source material than like the Lion King remake had been by quite some way. And was better for it. I think it was kind of became its own thing. It didn't try to emulate the previous one. It just tried to sort of like do its own version. And and especially surrounding the genie as a character. That's obviously you ain't following Robin Williams, so fucking good luck. So I think just by kind of like just changing the character to fit Will Smith better worked reasonably well. I thought the movie was fairly funny for what it was. So yeah.
Well, it's kind of like in the way that I think everyone was kind of in the lead up to it being like, oh, who's going to be trying to do Robin Williams? But it's like, well, Robin Williams was doing Robin Williams in Aladdin, so Will Smith did Will Smith in the Aladdin reboot, and I think that worked. And I also to weave us into analysis of this, because obviously it's fucking it's all out bangers. We know we recommend it. I think one thing the reboot did well that this film, and it's not a criticism, but it's a thing I would have loved to have seen in this movie, because other than which, as Dan said, we'll talk about, other than the stereotypes and stuff, it's a pretty perfect movie and script. I just think it needs what the reboot did, which is basically another half an hour, another 40 minutes. I think is on the reboot, and I think it needs that time. So much happens in this movie that a brave new world. Is it a brave new world?
A whole new world.
Yeah. A whole new world. That's it. Sorry, I've been singing it all fucking podcast. A whole new world is pretty much Jasmine and Aladdin fall in love in a song in a whole new world, and they're sort of. There's no, there's some big character leaps throughout this movie as there's so much plot, and they get away with it. It absolutely works. But I definitely sat there last night thinking, this could do with another half an hour. This could do with some of this stuff being fleshed out a bit more. They do a lot of clever, easy wins. Like a great example is at the beginning, you have an entire song about Aladdin being a thief, and then he immediately gives away his bread to those two small children, and you as an audience member go, "Oh, he's a rogue, but he's a lovely guy. He's a lovable rogue." They do a lot of great stuff like that. But I think honestly, you put another half an hour on this movie, and you really flesh out some of the character changes and character arcs, and it would be, it would be amazing. And fair play to the reboot, they did do that. So yeah,
it's an interesting thought because I've always felt with this movie that it always moves at a clip, but it never feels rushed. So I've always
it doesn't. No.
I've always praised this movie's pacing. I do think you're right though. There are a couple of ideas that could have used just a little bit of fleshing out. I wouldn't go as far to add in half an hour, but maybe another 10 or 15 minutes, because I do think at the time Disney were really good at making these pretty efficient, like, hour and a half movies. So for me, 10, 15 minutes maybe. Just the two things that need a little nudge from me. I think we need to have some consequences set up for what would happen if Jafar ruled Agrabah. Like, what's the negative connotation for the people? Yeah, obviously Jasmine and the Sultan being tortured is bad, but what's the issue for the realm, for the people of Agrabah, to have Jafar as their leader? What is it that he stands for that's a problem? Like in the reboot, they cleverly resolved that by having this war plot. I don't know if you recall from the reboot, but in the reboot, Jafar wants to be conquering. He doesn't want to be sat peacefully. He wants to go and sort of attack other nations. So that if he becomes sultan, that's a bad thing. That there'll be war, there'll be problems. I'm not saying it needs to be the same reason as that, but a reason that. The Jafar's plan is to make the poor poorer and the rich richer. I don't necessarily need the political commentary of that. I just mean, it just feels like, okay, Jafar becoming sultan is bad. In the sort of short, immediate term, that's bad for Jasmine and the sultan because they're kicked out of their grand palace. But we've set up the place of Agrabah. How does it affect everyone else? They all run screaming, but then we cut back and we don't see what happens. I mean, in The Lion King, when we return to Pride Rock, it's desolate. There's not enough food. There's a consequence to Scar taking over. It's not as clear. So I would have given an extra 2 or 3 minutes to the movie, maybe 5 to that. And the other thing is obviously Aladdin and Jasmine. I do think they get away with it for a pretty clever, 2 clever choices actually. The "Do you trust me" thing and the apple thing, because that basically means I think my interpretation of it, and I'd be curious to get yours, Chris. I think she figures out who he is before she gets on the carpet, because she's very resistant, she's very uninterested, and when he says, "Do you trust me?" she sort of narrows her eyes a little bit. She sort of, and then he's like, "Do you trust me?" And then she sort of looks a little bit knowingly and is like, "Yeah," and gets on. I don't think she'd have trusted Prince Abubu, as Jafar calls him, and I will never not call him that because it's fucking amazing. Instead of Ali Ababa, Prince Abubu. It's so good. His delivery is great. But so she gets on, and I think by then she already knows it's Aladdin. And the extra confirmation comes when they sort of float through the sort of Greece facsimile when he elbows her the apple the way Aladdin did, and she gets it, and she has this knowing smile. She's already figured that out. She doesn't know his name at that point. She doesn't know. She never got his name, but she knows it's the boy from the streets. She susses that out. So I think you can get away with combining the time they spent for a day earlier in the movie and all that talking they did and relating to each other they did with their magic carpet ride, and say they spent sort of 2 days together, which isn't massively better, but it is better than just the carpet ride being how they fell in love.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that interpretation for sure. And it's a Disney movie. It's meant to be sort of windswept and all of that sort of stuff. I think it's I would love to see an extension. And again, because another example is Aladdin and the genie. Like in the reboot, there's more of, and I'm not saying the reboot is better. To be very clear, I'm saying these are elements that I would love to see in the animated version that I think the reboot did well. Which is, you see Aladdin and the genie tussling about more, and like all the kind of Prince training stuff, and like him giving him thoughts on Jasmine, which is in this movie. All that's kind of tell her the truth stuff, and the way he can see that is brilliant. But they equally become best friends very quickly.
Yes.
I think fleshing that out would be great, and it's I mean, it shows because so basically a whole new world finishes. Then I paused the movie for some reason, and I'm like, "Fucking hell!" There's only 36 minutes left of this movie, including credits. A whole new world comes that late. Like in my head, there was a lot more after that. And I've just checked in the reboot, a whole new world is in about an hour. There's an hour left of the movie after a whole new world,
yes.
which feels right. Again, I can't, because there's obviously going to be a lot of pure Aladdin fans listening to this. I can't stress enough. This animation is obviously better, but there are a few things I think would be great to see. But it's not even particularly. This isn't even a nitpick, because it's more like I would just love to see those things fleshed out. I'm not particularly saying they categorically need to be.
Yeah.
I don't think the movie falls apart.
You're asking for more of the movie.
Just asking for more of the movie. Yeah, yeah. It's such a fun ride.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think what that speaks volumes to is that that reboot did understand what this movie was and what to enhance. That reboot. Again, I do think it is probably the best of the Disney reboot. Oh well, Cinderella was pretty good as it goes. The kind of the first one, the Kenneth Branagh one.
Yeah, and I really love cute animals displaying no emotions. So I'm a big fan of the Lion King reboot as well. And I think it's a really wise decision that if you don't want people to compare the two, because it's a different thing, to use exactly the same script and some of the same voices, so that there just feels like there's something just off kilter when you hear everyone else seeing lines that you know and love, but with different voices. That doesn't alienate and put you in a weird position and highlight differences at all. That is a decision. And Dan, I really love. You know me, Dan. I love. We did script writing at university. We love when writers don't get paid. And I think, claiming it's a new film, even though it's exactly the same script, and not paying those original writers, who also kind of did the same thing with another story, in fact, is just really healthy and a great reflection of the Hollywood machine. Oh, yeah. I'm all in on the Lion King reboot, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. That one surprises me, because you put Jon Favreau at the helm. You think, Jon Favreau did the Jungle Book one. That was all right.
Yeah.
You think he'd have learned his lesson. Or not even learned the lesson. You think he'd have improved, not got worse. Anyway.
It's a series. It's a
too
series
precious about it. That's almost why Guy Ritchie was such a clever choice, because I just feel like Guy Ritchie went, yeah, I get it. The fucking there's a funny monkey and a blue guy that makes jokes. I'll make that movie. I'm not gonna just borrow the script. I'll make some changes. It's gotta be worth seeing, right? It's gotta try something different, or it's not worth doing. I feel like Guy Ritchie just didn't give a fuck, and that's actually his lack of being precious about it. Whereas I feel like Jon Favreau was shit scared of the Disney fans. And just was like, no, it's the Lion King. It's got to be exactly the Lion King. He didn't want to mess with anything. He messed with the only stuff he messed with was stuff he absolutely had to mess with.
It's bizarre, and it's also the perfect. It's the most incredible, perfect cast, and it still feels off. How do you have Childish Gambino and Beyonce, essentially playing lovers, and still you go no,
flat.
Anyway,
feels flat. But yeah, let's start talking about the remakes. We're going to talk ourselves into a hole lot otherwise. So this film. Let's talk about some of the other stuff in this film. I mean. We've covered the pacing, but let's look specifically at the three act structure of this film, because what I think is amazing about this film is I've never known a film to have its second act end so late. It should not work. I think I glanced at the time and saw there was 10 minutes late 10 minutes left or something when Aladdin reaches his quote unquote low point, which for me is one of my favorite parts of the entire movie. It's Jafar sings his verse of Prince Ali, which is just such a brilliant way. For a character that's been so stoic, the joy he takes in exposing Aladdin and then firing him off into the sky and going, whee, as he does it, is just glorious. It's so good. I can't express how much I love that moment. But also, just dramatically, you just go like, I remember as a kid just being like, how's he going to get out of this? I mean, on VHS, I certainly couldn't check how long was left of the movie either. But there's only like 10, 15 minutes of the movie left at most. I'd have to bring it back up to double check, but there's almost nothing of the movie left when that happens. And structurally, that's so much later than that moment normally comes. And I can't tell if that's because maybe the ending is a bit underserved and quick, but it doesn't feel it when you watch it either, though. Like, the ending does feel right. So in terms of the pacing, specifically the structure, the movie does take a little bit of while to get to the genie. I think like 30, 40 minutes of the movie have gone by before we see Genie. And then the end of the second act sort of happens with only 10, 15 minutes left at most. I think less, actually, from memory. But, how did you feel? Did you notice that? Did you feel that at all? Did the ending feel quick after that being the low point so late in the film?
No, which is crazy. Because like you, I'm like, there's like 10 minutes left. How are they achieving this magic trick? But they do. Like, it's fantastic. And I don't know if it's because they've done so much work, or at least the work they have done has been so exceptional that you understand exactly where the characters are. You know how they're feeling. So the last act doesn't need to do any of that stuff. It can just be pure plot. I also think they make some clever decisions. I like the fact, for example, that we don't. I think the genie's goodbye could be a bit longer or have more heft. But Genie buggers off. Aladdin and Jasmine. We don't have to see the wedding. We don't have to see them paraded through the streets. We just get them on the magic carpet. We know they're happy. I think that just makes it feels like they've just trimmed it very, very well. They're not doing the things that you would think you'd need to see, particularly. The resolution is all set up, so it makes sense. So that again can be quite quick and is very logical as well. Yeah,
I think that's really interesting, isn't it? Because it just feels like, I think you're right. I think they've just been very clever about what they have and haven't kept. Like in terms of just where they've made the sort of quote unquote cuts. Yeah, okay, so I just checked, just for my own sanity. From Aladdin being fired off into the snowy wilderness, and then, his journey, that's like his low point when he's like, I've failed, I've got it all wrong, look at all the bad things that have happened, blah, 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 to the credits of the movie, it's 10 minutes. That happens at an hour and 15, and the movie's credits run at an hour and 25.
That's wild.
Isn't that crazy?
But it's also good. Visually, it's captivating. Things like her being put in the sand timer is a really cool visual. When we see the evil version of the genie, it's brilliant.
Yeah, I think
it's so much fun. That last sequence,
Yeah, and I think that's true of the whole movie. Like this, I think one of the things that makes this movie come to life is I feel like they I don't know if it. Look, I don't want to give Robin Williams credit for things that he wasn't involved in, but this feels very dynamic, even for a Disney movie. It's like animation wise, it just feels like they're doing a lot more creatively than other Disney movies from this time. We're doing in terms of let me rephrase that actually for more of the movie. So every big Disney movie from prior to this had certain sequences that were above and beyond, incredible visually. A lot of people, talk about Be Our Guest from Beauty and the Beast, and that is an amazing sequence. But there are big chunks of that movie that are animated fairly standardly, not obviously badly. It's still beautiful Disney hand-drawn animation from that era. It's incredible. But it feels like a higher percentage of this movie is operating at Be Our Guest levels the whole time. You know what I mean? Like it's really something. Like I think something like Friend Like Me would have been their moment to just go nuts with the animation in another world. But the version of this movie we actually got, it feels like they put that kind of level of detail and care and attention into like literally every shot of this movie. It's so dynamically done. Everything is bursting with like energy and sort of like interesting visuals and shot choices and weird quirky little details. It's hard to explain. There aren't many simple people in rooms talking scenes. There's always something else going on, and that is just incredible. Go on.
But every scene is also in service to the characters and the plot. Like every scene, it's almost a series of sequences of plot happening to characters, and us feeling the weight of what that plot is and what it means for the characters. Like it's so often in movies, there are scenes which are superfluous to requirements. Nothing in here is wasted.
Yeah.
And I think again that's how they get away with it being so short. That's why I'm saying I'd love to see more, but it works without it.
Yeah.
Because every single thing is in service to the characters. And actually, if you think about it as well, sorry, I know you were about to say something, but if you think about it as well, it's pulling a similar magic trick to Spider-Man No Way Home. No Way Home.
No Way Home.
Which does a similar thing where every single scene, every single beat of that movie is in service of telling the story of what's happening to Tom Holland's Spider-Man. And this is doing a similar thing. If you think about it, there's not a lot of B plot in this movie. It's literally Aladdin's story, and then it becomes Aladdin and Jasmine, but that is related to Aladdin. There's not even the villain stuff. That's not a B, like that intertwines with him like within the first like 20 minutes. Like we're not cutting away to see what the villagers are up to. Even at the end, like when we could do by having a wedding and what that means to the city. Sorry, not the village. Like it's not doing a lot of it. There's not 3 separate A, B, C plots to this movie. It's all an A plot, and everything just happens in service of that. And I think the same. I don't think No Way Home gets enough credit for that. There's not that. Yes, there's side stories that happen to different characters, but fundamentally, both that movie and this movie are. This happens, then this happens, then this happens, then this happens. It's not this happens, and then at the same time, something over here is happening. And then, if we look over here, this is also happening. And then they're going to collide together at the end. No. Literally, this happens, this happens, this happens, and it's all telling the same story. It's all in service of that. And it truds along at a pace as a result.
Yeah, and I think those, like, small animation choices help fill out. It's one of the reasons they get away with such a brisk script that doesn't necessarily go into a huge amount of depth. Is those animation details really do tell you a lot about what's going on. Like, showing Jafar casually sitting in the Sultan's throne after the Sultan walks out the room tells you how Jafar feels about things. We don't need necessarily even dialogue in that moment. It tells you. And you're right. Even in somebody's counter to what you just said, somebody could give, and I wouldn't agree with them, but they would say, oh well, it opens on a random salesman and moves off to Jafar and doesn't get to Aladdin for a good few minutes, blah blah blah. But what Jafar is learning when he is in that opening scene, and it is an unusual choice to open on not the hero. I do understand that structurally it's a bit strange, but what we learn in that scene not only is that plot-wise Jafar is looking for Aladdin. He's looking for the diamond in the rough. We cut to Aladdin, but then we get that phrase, the diamond in the rough, which immediately tells us something about Aladdin as a character too. He's that phrase evokes a certain thought about the person, right? Like a good person, maybe with some rough edges, something to, there's something more to him than what he might seem on the surface, right? So we've learned something about Aladdin before we've seen an image of him on screen. Just by that, but just by doing that, and the salesman is telling Aladdin's story. He says there was a boy that once owned this lamp. He's telling Aladdin's story. So, and the salesman, you might not be aware as well, I should clarify, Chris, is also, you will have noticed this, voiced by Robin Williams, but for a reason. The original premise was that at the end they were going to reveal that the salesman was Robin Williams, was the genie in sort of like joking disguise, making all, doing all that. And when you look back, you can tell he's wearing like a blue cloak with a red sash around the middle. Like, he looks like the genie. He's like, it's quite interesting. It's just, I guess he's going around telling the story of the guy who freed him.
Which is a really nice notion.
Yeah, it's a shame that didn't end up in the movie, to be honest. But otherwise I don't know why you keep the setup personally. But yeah, whatever, it's fine.
I think it's a good framing device. Like, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I don't dislike it. I just kind of like, would I rather just tell the story, start with Jafar, and use those 2 or 3 minutes to maybe spend more time with Jasmine and Aladdin? Maybe.
Yeah,
if I was making an unbalanced trade, if Disney were outright saying to me, let's say I was like a producer on this film, and they were saying like the movie's got to be an hour and 30. It's got to be an hour and 30. It can't be a minute long. And let me tell you, the final Disney logo before all the Disney Plus extra 5 minutes of bullshit on the version I watched was exactly 1 hour, 30 minutes, and 24 seconds.
It's so weird, isn't it, Disney Plus? Like, you turn something on and you're like, oh, fucking hell. Especially, like, the stuff they make. And you're like, oh, God, it's 56 minutes. And then you're like, oh, no, it's actually 45. There's just 10 minutes of shit Disney Plus have put on.
Yeah, I don't feel like other platforms do it quite so extensively. I just feel like that's a Disney Plus thing. I think that's exclusive to their weirdness. But anyway, so the movie is an hour and a half, almost exactly. Like, it's like a 1 hour, 30 minutes, and 30 seconds. Now, that feels like a mandate to me. That feels like Disney being like, well, we make hour and a half movies, we're in, we're out, So if in that scenario, and I'm thinking, God, I could probably use another scene or two of Aladdin and Jasmine being together so that we buy the love story just that slightly bit more, or we just get more time with it. There is 3 minutes at the start of the movie that could easily go before the movie starts proper, and I think there's a debate to be made there for that being a thing you could do, because I think one thing might be slightly more valuable than the other. I don't mind the framing device, but I also don't need the framing device. So there you go. Although the way they created that framing device is quite fun. They brought Robin Williams in, put him in front of a table of objects, and just told him to do it, and he just ad-libbed the entire scene.
Yeah, I mean, I assume there's triv about that, which might be worth bringing into discussion, like, in terms of the incredible improvisation and what Robin Williams is doing with this performance, which, you almost don't need to say it, but it's fucking phenomenal.
Yeah, the energy he brings to that character is unlike anything Disney have created before or since, I feel. And that is down to ad-libbing. He was recording lines for this across several years, but they ended up with, I think they said something like 16 hours worth of Robin Williams doing lines as the genie material, which is incredible to think that's probably still in an archive room somewhere. Imagine that. You could probably do a sequel with that amount of content.
Well, isn't there something in his will that they can't
honestly, yeah, I imagine because there's another bit of trivia we'll have to cover later on about Robin Williams' interactions with this movie that actually led to a very serious falling out with Disney about how they handled some stuff, because they agreed to something and then completely lied and just didn't do it and just didn't do the agreement at all. We'll come back to that, but so yeah, I'm sure if that's true, it wouldn't surprise me in the least, because he did not trust Disney after this movie. So yeah, so I think, you've got this guy that's come in and he's given you 16 hours of mostly improvised material, and with that quality, it's incredible. What I think is interesting, though, is I don't think without Robin Williams coming in and doing it in his brilliant Robin Williams way, there's no way you're putting all these impressions in the movie. That's because even as a kid, I remember thinking, but how does anyone know who Jack Nicholson is? Is this not? I mean, is this not at least somewhat in the past? Like,
it is bizarre. Like, and it's still bizarre even now
because it's either our world, but historically, or it's like another world. Like, Agrabah isn't a real place that exists and couldn't exist for numerous reasons we'll get to in a bit. Because Agrabah is a bizarre creation and quite possibly a very racist creation, but we'll come to that too. But you can either assume it's a fictional place or it's our world in the past and it's just like a lost city we don't have on record or whatever. But if that's the case, why is no one going, what's that voice you just did, Genie? Oh, it was Jack Nicholson. Who's Jack Nicholson, Genie? I don't know. Who was that? Genie? That was Arnold Schwarzenegger. Like, what?
But can you write it off with the Genie's all powerful? It's just in his cosmos that,
Sure. The Genie is particularly fond of 90s culture.
No, just that the Genie can reach forward into time and can see things.
All of time and space, and he really, really focused in on early 90s culture and late 80s culture. Yeah, sure.
Well, when you put it like that, it arguably falls apart a little, but...
Well, I just, even as a kid, I didn't get half the fucking references. I still don't get some of them. Like, who the fuck is Cab Calloway? I know that's who he's doing. I've been told that's who he's doing. I don't know who that is. Like,
yeah, no, I have no idea.
Who's Walter Brennan? I'm not sure I know who that is. I know who Peter Lorre is. I thought that's a good one. I got Groucho Marx and Ed Sullivan and Arnold Schwarzenegger. Rodney Dangerfield, I kind of get. That's through osmosis, though, rather than... Oh, sorry, not my mic. Through actually knowing. I don't really know who Rodney Dangerfield is. Although, whenever I hear the name Rodney Dangerfield, I just think of that incredible BoJack Horseman bit when... someone's got into an interview and they're not using their own CV and someone says, it says here you do a great Rodney Dangerfield impression. Could I hear it? And he just goes, I'm Roger Dangerfield. The guy replies, that's classic Dangerfield. So good. It's a great joke. Brilliant. Yeah, it's very good. But yeah, so it's like half of these references, like, I mean, who the hell is Harry Reasoner? I don't know. So, there is an element of like, you only get away with this because of the genius of Robin Williams' impressions, and he brings them such to life. Even if you don't get who he's doing, it's still a fun caricature to watch. If that makes sense? Like, and it's usually relevant to what he's saying. It's not like plucked completely from at random. He's Jack Nicholson when he's telling him to be a straight shooter. So he's doing all of that. I get it, but like, yeah, it shouldn't work. It absolutely shouldn't work.
In some ways, and obviously Robin Williams deserves all the accolades for that, but in some ways, you know what? I don't think the animators get enough credit for it either. The way you want to pull off a Jack Nicholson impression, like you want to help. The reason if it's just a Jack Nicholson impression, even Robin Williams doing that exact performance, if they don't animate it to make you go, fucking Genie Jack Nicholson, then it doesn't work as well. You certainly don't get away with it as well as you do with the visuals they are putting with that performance. The hand example for one, where it's like the exits are here. It's phenomenal.
Yeah.
But the animation is so quick and so in sync and so timed with it. Tell her the truth, and you have the little game show thing. Like, it's the animation of it as well. It's phenomenal,
stunning, and I think that is. And that's what I meant earlier when I was saying that, like, I think he helped the animators raise their game a little bit because they've got all this incredible voice work, which I assume much of which was recorded before they were animating, so they could animate to it. Because otherwise, I don't know how this happened. They must have known, especially if his stuff was ad-libbed. Like, they must have known that the Genie was gonna, do the game show thing, because otherwise, how do you can't just draw that and hope that Robin Williams ad-libs a line like that. So I'm assuming he recorded first. But it just feels like they were so inspired by his wacky bouncing off the walls, like sort of like to and fro approach to just like, I'm going to reference this, I'm going to reference this, and I'm going to reference this, all within 10 seconds, you know, and they've just gone like, that's amazing. We'll animate the genie popping into that. Like, we'll have him do, I mean, the Pinocchio gag, when he calls him a liar and he turns,
brilliant.
I mean, things like that, which I'm not even sure is in, I don't think he says, does he say Pinocchio? I think he just...
No, I don't believe so, no.
And so that's them being inspired by the kinetic energy of Robin Williams' performance to bring the genie to life in that very, very frantic way. That is such a specific energy that character has. That I will say, and I love the guy to bits, but Dan Castellaneta, who took over from Robin Williams for the sequel and the TV series because of Robin Williams' fallout with Disney. Robin did come back for the third movie, but we'll talk about that later. Dan Castellaneta, God bless him, did an absolutely brilliant job trying to recreate the voice, but no one could recreate the energy. That's the problem. It's not just the voice that makes that performance so special, so magical. To sound a bit cheesy there, but it is absolutely down to that. And again, I'm not trying to take credit away from the animators for doing all that incredible work. What I'm simply saying is that it feels to me sometimes like having that material helped inspire that from them. For sure.
For sure it did. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but they did do an incredible job.
How could it possibly not? Do you know what I mean?
Yes, 100%. But what amazing artistry went into this film. Visually, I think this film is stunning. There are some issues with the early Disney attempts to put CG in the movies because they were figuring out if that could be a thing to save time and money. So there are a couple of shots that don't work. Particularly, sadly, Aladdin escaping the cave. There's a point when it feels like a video game, and I don't care for that. Sometimes the shots of Agrabah, you can tell that the top of the palace is a CG sort of creation to make it look a bit 3D. I guess that's fine. You don't really notice that one so much. But there's a couple of moments, and they're not great. If I'm being honest. But other than that, and that's not the artistry. That's not the fault of the artists involved, by the way. Well, that's just limitations of the time's technology. Maybe they opted to use that technology before it was ready. I think the Cave of Wonders itself, which seems to be a CG 3D creation, blends in well enough because it's a dark shot. But it moves unlike anything else in the movie. I think you get away with that because it's a cave made out of sand, and it moving weird feels intentional rather than they got a bit too big for their britches here, and they went ahead and used some technology that wasn't quite ready, which is probably what happened. I mean, they were experimenting for years. They even did it in Beauty and the Beast. I think I think the ballroom scene, the actual ballroom itself, is a computer creation, which is why the camera can do that iconic swing move where it swings around them as they spin, which is beautiful, an incredible shot. I think they got a bit too ambitious here, maybe, particularly in the cave escape sequence.
Some of that is ropey. Some of it's also incredible.
Right.
Like, some of it is...
The hand-drawn stuff is just absolutely insane. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's wild. It's like, it's such a rush. Like, I was watching it last night, like, fucking hell, this is, like, phenomenal.
Right, yeah, absolutely. No, I 100% agree with that. Especially once they get out of the main chamber, and it's like, it cuts back to almost entirely hand-drawn animation, and Aladdin's going up towards the thing, and he gets hit by the rock, and he rolls down that few steps that are left. The shot when the carpet catches him after Jafar drops him, man, that's a great sequence. I like that sequence in general. I like the way Jafar manipulates Aladdin as well by being an old man, because you're right. Like, if Jafar just was like, because when Jafar asked that guy at the beginning, I think the character might be called Kareem. I can't remember, but Jafar's like, hey, go down into the scary cave. I'd be like, you go down. What am I going? You go. This is your nonsense. Go.
Yeah,
get
but
in
he's arrested and captured at that point, isn't he? And for all he knows, like, it's this or execution.
Right, yeah, that's a fair point. Yeah, that's fair. So I always thought, though, to have Aladdin sort of, like, manipulated into it by using his humanity, well, I'm an old man, I can't go down into the cave, I'd struggle. Yeah, I believe that Aladdin would go, all right, and help that guy. Like that makes sense to me. That really works, I think, because it also tells us something about the character. On that subject of deaths, this movie's pretty dark. Particularly, the implication. I mean, and we'll talk about the stereotyping element of this in a minute. But the implication they're going to chop off Jasmine's hand is pretty rough. But also the implication that Jafar just immediately, with no justice system in place, just had Aladdin beheaded for kidnapping the princess.
And the way he's like, I will marry her and use her to get power. That sounds like a great idea. With no sort of,
See, in the beginning, when they first introduced that idea early in the movie, when Iago tells Iago plants that seed. I like the Iago character. We'll talk about that in a minute because Gilbert Gottfried does a great job. When they introduce that, the idea is marry her, become sultan, then chuck him off a cliff. Is Iago's line or something like that? Get rid of him. That's fine. Because I'm just like, he's literally marrying her for the title. He has no interest in Jasmine. He just wants the power. But then they undercut that at the end of the movie in a way that I feel is deeply uncomfortable and doesn't work. And it's one of the few things in the movie that I really think doesn't work, which is the sequence towards the end of the movie when he asks her to actually marry him. Because, a great leader needs a pretty lady on his arm or whatever bullshit line he gives. And he offers her a crown and she's like, no. And then she realizes she can distract him to help Aladdin succeed, and she suddenly, it's quite a smart shift from her to pretend that the genie's spell worked, and she pretends to have fallen in love with Jafar, leading to them kissing, and the movie reacts correctly to that. All the characters go, ugh, which is funny, but the fact, I mean, how old is, I fear Googling this. How old?
Well, it doesn't. Well, the thing is, regardless of that, it doesn't need that kiss in it. Do you know what I mean? You don't need.
Yeah,
that
she's supposed to be 16. Gross.
Yeah,
she's supposed to be 16. That's real weird.
While we're on this, while we're on kind of uncomfortable, let's talk about the stereotyping because it's obviously not great. It's not right for any of it to be there. I don't think it's as egregious as 101 Dalmatians. I don't think it's as overt.
101 Dalmatians. Do you mean Lady and the Tramp?
I do mean Lady and the Tramp. Thank you. Sorry.
No,
yes,
it's okay.
I do mean because
honestly, mate, I know that was just me losing my mind for a second, going, "What the fuck do they do in 101 Dalmatians?" I was like, genuinely, anything you said after you said that name of that movie was gone because my brain went into overdrive trying to figure out what you were referring to, and then I remembered. We Are Siamese, If You Please, and all the horrible racial stereotyping in 101 Dalmatians.
And that's the thing. I think racial slurs is the right term for Lady and the Tramp. And those, and if any, we've reviewed Lady and the Tramp on here, and we still praise the movie outside of that. But for anyone that's not listened to that episode, but that feels more like racial slurs than this does. So, and I'm not going, it's okay because this is worse or anything like that. But I don't think it is. I think it's worth saying I don't feel it's as egregious as some of the other Disney movies.
Yeah. So I think in terms of that stuff, the sort of the stereotyping, the issues are pretty widespread. They're not. It's not as simple as just stereotyping either. And I will say, obviously, this goes without saying, but as a sort of white guy from England, I don't feel like I have a huge place in this discussion, but
that's fair.
I will say some of the observations I've both seen and read watching this movie. I think it's worth us acknowledging these issues, and I think the issues are actually there's a few of them, and I think one of them is these weird archetypal depictions of a place that if you steal, the shop owner will grab you and lop off your hand, which is just I don't think it, I think even when practices like that might have existed somewhere in the Middle East, I suspect there would have still been some level of judicial system and officials involved, and it would not have been just the shop owner catches you and whips out a fucking blade. Like, I just don't. So, but then on top of that, I think there's also I think the original intention was to have Agrabah be based on Iraq, but I think in the end what happened was a choice not to do that. I suspect because, let's be honest, the USA in the 90s, probably some not so pleasant thoughts to the general public on Iraq. I imagine there was quite a lot of anti-Iraqi sentiment in the country at the time. So I understand why the change, and I think it's probably smarter to set this in a fictional land than somewhere, that we've already, than somewhere that's real and it can be crossed. But if you're going to do that and make it a fictional place, then you need to make more changes than they've made here, because the problem you have is it's clear from some of the things they say, like the Sultan says praise Allah, so it's clear that that is a Muslim way to address God. So the religion in Agrabah is clearly Islam, and I think, why do that if you're no longer going to set it in that? If you're going to essentially create a place, you need to remove that, I think. I also think that there are issues with all the villains follow Middle Eastern, like, bad, negative Middle Eastern stereotypes, whereas a lot of the lead characters culturally sort of like come across Caucasian. They come across quite westernized, which implies that it's by default that is the superior way to be, which I think is bad too. The people who most display the cultural stuff in this are usually the villains, which is not good. Then there's the other thing, which is the mishmashing of things. So I did my research for this movie. I saw a YouTube video where the guy was like, imagine a movie and it's a German folktale, but it's for some reason been set in London, but the buildings look like they're from Sweden, and they're wearing traditional Norwegian clothing. And they're referencing religions done in different countries. And it was like, basically, if you know this region of the world, this is an insane thing to watch. Nothing about it works. It is so bizarrely mishmashed. You could argue inaccuracy or ignorance, sure, but like it's also just like weirdly offensive, because what it essentially does is go, they're all the same, right? They're all brutal desert places that no one likes to be in. We're great here in the West. And I think all that is a real problem. And I know people who grew up feeling seen and represented by this movie, with Middle Eastern heritage, so I don't think this is going to be how everyone feels. I think some people are going to go, it's a dumb kids movie from the 90s. Between the time it was made and the fact it's a kids movie, it doesn't surprise me this stuff was just kind of like, well, and I definitely don't think the intention Disney or with the creators of the movie was problematic. I don't think anybody making this movie set out to make a racist movie, but unfortunately they did, in my view. And I still love the movie dearly, but it would be outright wrong for me to not acknowledge some of these issues.
I think a lot of that I haven't watched any YouTube videos on it. I hadn't picked up on, and I think my whole thing about comparing to Lady and the Tramp, it was perhaps a bit naive, and I apologise for that, because I think when you lay it all out like that,
right?
Yeah, it's hard not to feel uncomfortable.
Yeah. It's a shame that this is how the movie ends up. But I mean, do I want to give Disney credit for making the change they made? So that Disney made a change about a year after the movie came out due to pressure. 1 second, I'll find the line. Where is it? Come on, here we go. So, a section of the original lyrics to the song Arabian Nights was altered after the movie's theatrical release because Arab American groups claimed that it was basically racist, so the line was changed. You can actually tell when you listen to it now that it's been re-recorded. It's very obviously a different recording. So the original line, and this is horrendous. Oh, I come from a land, from a faraway place where the caravan camels roam, where they cut off your ear if they don't like your face. It's barbaric, but hey, it's home. So that line was changed a year after release. I think, and I'm not sure, but I'm fairly confident that the VHS copy I had was the very earliest release, and the line had not been changed yet, because I remember being confused years later when I acquired a DVD copy of this movie, and the line was different. But the line they changed it to is where it's flat and immense, and the heat is intense. It's barbaric, but hey, it's home. Saying that like the weather conditions are, are what's barbaric. It's so hot that's what's, Yeah. I don't know. That's rough. And I agree with Disney changing it. I also agree with Disney. When I started up the movie last night, I was surprised to see it had a disclaimer in front of it on Disney Plus. I don't know if you noticed the same disclaimer.
Yeah. We've talked a lot about how those disclaimers are the right way to, in our opinion, approach this type of thing. So yeah, I was pleased to see one.
Yeah, so just for anyone who doesn't have Disney Plus and doesn't know that, Disney currently have a disclaimer in front of it that basically says the program includes negative depictions of or mistreatment of people or a culture. These stereotypes were wrong then and are wrong now, but rather than remove the content, we want to acknowledge its harmful impact, learn from it, and spark conversation to create a more inclusive future together. That's pretty good. And then it has a little thing to learn more about how stories impact society. Visit disney.com/storiesmatter. And what's funny about it is it's on screen and you cannot skip it. It's there for 15 seconds.
Yeah. I've never noticed that before, and I don't know if that's new. It's certainly a new, design for that screen, so it might be new. And I loved the fact that you couldn't skip it.
Yeah, well, because the thing is, the only reason I discovered you couldn't skip it was when I went back to look at a scene from the movie later on. Because obviously, when it came on originally, I just there's the disclaimer. I didn't even think too much about it, and then later on, I went back to look at a specific scene, and when it came up, I was like, I've seen this now. I was trying to get into the movie and it wouldn't let me. I was like, I've got to wait the 15 seconds. All right, fine, Disney. It's tricky, and I don't think you were wrong to compare it to some of the stuff that's done in Lady and the Tramp. I think that's I think. It all comes from a similar place, right? It's it's a reducing a culture down to these simple stereotypes. Yeah. It all comes from the same thought process. The only problem is with Lady and the Tramp, I think the biggest difference and the reason that they feel different to me is Lady and the Tramp. It's like tertiary characters come in and represent these things briefly and leave, but because this movie is set in the fictional but clearly coded land of Agrabah. I don't know. That's not great. It's because it's the whole movie, and you really can't. Yeah. You really have to. Yeah, I don't know. And also, it doesn't help. And we didn't even cover this. The cast are pretty much mostly white people, and that's not great either. So yeah, we've covered it. There's nothing really to say on it other than that it is bad. And by praising the movie, we're not saying any of that is acceptable, obviously, but it's the reason Disney leave it up in its unaltered state. It's the same thing. It sparks discussion. We learn from these things. Hopefully, these are things we might, that might have helped avoid putting this sort of content in future movies. So
yeah, I think pretending it not acknowledging it is wrong. And equally, heavily editing stuff so those discussions don't happen is also wrong. So, like we've said in the past, I think that's absolutely the right move.
Yes. So there you go. That took longer to cover than I was hoping, but there's a lot to it. It's a many-dimensioned element of this movie, unfortunately.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. So here's to kind of have almost maybe not a wrap-up discussion, but
to bring us around
to praise some other things. do you or ask a question? The music, because do you think it's as catchy? Because obviously nothing's beating The Lion King, and I feel it's probably better than my memory of The Little Mermaid and stuff. But it's not. You're not humming anything really other than Whole New World at the end of it, are you? Visually, the music number. Oh, and I suppose the Genie song as well. Now visually, and they are obviously all catchy. They're all tunes, but you know the Lion, and it's probably unfair to compare. But Lion King's got like 6 iconic songs.
Has it?
What are your thoughts on that?
I think The Lion King's music is boring bullshit. I'm surprised to even hear you say that. I hate the songs from The Lion King. I think there's Can't Wait to Be King, and everything else is just like whatever.
Wow.
That really shocked me that you said that. Like, I was like listening to you speak, like, is this a joke? No way.
No, I think, Can You Feel the Love Tonight? Obviously, my favourite version of Can You Feel the Love Tonight is the Honest Trailer edit, which is we are gonna pork tonight. We are totally gonna pork. But yeah, no, I love the music in The Lion King, all of it.
Really? Yeah. I think Just Can't Wait to Be King's good, and then I can't tell you the name of another song other than the one you just sang.
Again, the Honest Trailer edit for that is I just can't wait till Dad dies. I'm gonna be like, it's basically a song about him wishing his dad away.
So I tell you, I've remembered another one. There's a Hakuna Matata as well, but yeah, not for me.
Which again, honest trailer version. They just killed my dad.
So
but forget all that. An African catchphrase.
I think what we'll do here is just say, you can stop this podcast clearly, because what we're going to be doing now is just apparently repeating all the jokes from the Honest Trailer for the rest of this. So you're free to go.
Not even.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week when we do another movie. Take care, everyone.
Not even for the film we're talking about.
No. I think the music in this is far superior. Honestly, everything about the music in this is a mile better for me. And I think, I've got to acknowledge there's a certain amount of bias. This was, I never loved Lion King the way I love this movie. Never. Absolutely never. So that's part of it. But yeah, absolutely every song of this is banger top to bottom. I mean, literally last night, I was, before I even put it on, I was running around the house singing Prince Ali, because that's just that's a glorious song. And obviously Friend Like Me will forever be. Whole New World is obviously, a masterpiece for its own reasons. I mean, that actually charted, I believe. So yeah, no, I don't agree with that. I think the music of this movie is absolutely amazing, and I think as well, spaced out correctly. That's the other big one.
Yeah, no, I'll give you that. Yeah.
Because it doesn't feel like there's a song every 2 minutes. Yeah, and also, oh man, Aladdin's like the opening song, which I never remember the title of. What is that called? What is the actual name of that song? I must know that. So, it's got to steal to eat, tell you all about it when I got there. One Jump Ahead. There you go. Yeah, One Jump Ahead of that one. That one's amazing. Like, I can't imagine somebody listening to that and not being blown away by that song. It's so good.
I'm not saying they're not great.
They
didn't get stuck in my. They just don't get stuck in my head as much. I'm not saying they're not fantastic. And like I say, the visuals in particular are wonderful, and I completely agree with your comment about them being spaced out. I guess the Honest Trailer versions didn't stick in my head as much, and therefore I judge it harshly.
But I think the songs have such energy, and the visuals are choreographed so well around them. Like with One Jump Ahead, which I now hopefully will remember the title of next time it comes up, because yeah. I just didn't know that. I knew it was the title, I was assuming, but I just couldn't recall. But when he's running around and like with the beat of the song, like it's. I mean, and that song has some really weird lines in it though, because it's got that line where it's like. What is it? I'd blame the parents, except he hasn't got them. I'm like, holy shit, lady, leave the kid alone. That's brutal.
I thought that. I was like, wow, what a quick way to brush over the fact that this character's an orphan.
Yeah, like wow, that's savage. And then there's the other lady that's like, still I think he's rather tasty, and he like runs away. Like, you know, so it's like there's a few weird lines in that one, but it's a really fun song. I love the way it's choreographed. I think, you know, the way he's being chased and all the different creative things they do with the chase is really fun. There's a lot of great visual gags in that aren't part of the song, but are just added, like the guy on the thing in needles, and then the guy lands on him. Like, that's kind of funny. The running over the hot coals thing is pretty funny. You know, Aladdin leaps over, they run over. Yeah, there's some really fun stuff in that. So yeah, I really like the songs. I like the way they're animated a lot as well. I do find it deeply distracting that Aladdin's singing voice and talking voice are different, especially in Whole New World. That's when it's most obvious.
Are they different actors or something?
Yeah, they are. Same for Jasmine, but I think they found a better match. When she sings, you know, she doesn't get a whole song of her own though, which she does in the remake, which I actually quite like.
Yeah, which is also another nice addition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she needs a song. It's a shame. So apparently the original plan was for Jafar to have a song, a villain song, because that was quite an iconic idea for, you know, Disney, not all, but like most of the Disney movies from back in the day. I think all but this one and one other one, but I can't remember what the other one is. I think I read there was one of two. But yeah, they mostly did have a villain song, and they wrote one for Jafar. It just didn't end up in the movie. But I think maybe they put it back in for the stage show. I think I read. I don't know. We'll come to it. I think it's in the trove, so we'll come to that. But yeah, all really good. In terms of other details, though, I tell you one thing I really like about this movie, and we haven't talked about this too much, but Jasmine stands out above many of the other Disney princesses from the time, for being quite independent and capable. Like, there's the bit where Aladdin puts the plank down for her to cross, and she just leaps over, and is like, I'm a fast learner. And then, like, you know, there's the great scene when they're all discussing her future, and she comes in like, who are you three men sitting around just talking about what my future is? Like, you know, I'm not surprised to be one. And she storms off. I'm like, what a great speech. What a great moment. Like a fiercely independent character, and I'm happy about that. She is still, unfortunately, just by nature of the movie, defined by her relationship with Aladdin, but that doesn't change that I really like it.
Yeah, and I think they make it, you know, very clear that, you know, Aladdin is her choice. You know, at the end, I choose him, I choose you, Aladdin, and kind of all of that stuff. I think, yes, you know, she's definitely servicing the plot of you know, for the Aladdin character. So's everyone in the movie, though. It's, you know, it's not right, but she is, you know, if we're comparing, like you say, I think she's a stronger Disney princess than a lot of other Disney princesses from the time.
Yeah, and I would agree, and I do think as well, like, it makes the Sultan character quite sweet, but one sort of slight negative is that he's like, the reason he wants her to get married is partially because he wants her to be looked after if he dies. And I'm just like, the implication there is he doesn't believe she can look after herself, and like, I kind of need the movie to do something with that. Or it just seems like that's the movie's view. Like, he needs to feel proved wrong at the end of the movie on that view. Yeah,
well, especially if your resolution is going to be, I'm the Sultan. I could just change that law. Oh, okay.
Cool. Right. Yeah. So anyway, so yeah, shall I hit up some of the notes and see if there's anything we can that specifically?
Give us your.
I've noted down one of my favorite jokes in the whole movie. He's got a sword. You idiots! We've all got swords. Remains one of the funniest moments in this movie, and if anyone's forgetting what that is, that's Abu gets a sword and starts swinging it around, and the guards are all scared of him until they remember they also have swords, which is just great. That is just objectively brilliant. We haven't talked about Gilbert Gottfried yet. Gilbert Gottfried as Iago is a really fun addition to this movie. He is a good foil for Jafar, like a good counterpoint to Jafar. His energy is great, and he has many of the movie's best jokes. Nadia pointed something out last night, though, that maybe slightly ruined the character for me, which is that he has a beak, but inside of his beak he has teeth, and that is all sorts of weird. And once you notice that, you can't unnotice that.
I didn't notice that, but now... but I did. There is an equivalent, which I've heard before, which is that Aladdin doesn't have nipples.
Right. Yes. Which is correct. I guess they thought nipples were too sexual, so they pulled them out of the movie. I don't know. Yeah.
Fair point.
Another great subtle joke that I've never picked up on before, and it's in the dialogue. It's like it's not subtle in the sense it's not hidden, but I just don't think my brain ever took it in. There's a really great line from the Sultan after Jasmine walks off at one point where he says, "I don't know where she gets it from. Her mother was never so picky." That's such a great little self-deprecating dig. Yeah, brilliant.
That's very good.
We've already talked about that. Moving on. I just want to keep us moving. So anything I've already talked about, I'm gonna skip. Oh, there's the Iago has teeth problem. Well, oh yeah, Abu. Now they got the great. Is it Frank Welker or Frank Weller? I never know how to pronounce this guy's name. Let me find it.
Frank Weller, isn't it?
Is it Welker? No, it is Welker.
Yeah.
With a K. So Frank Welker, an absolutely iconic voice actor. He's just doing Donald Duck, though, isn't he? Like, I really like his work in this movie. I think Abu has a lot of energy, but there are points when it's just Donald Duck. Am I wrong? Am I crazy?
I hadn't noticed. I think that's another. Now you've pointed it out. If I rewatched it, I would absolutely notice that.
Right.
But it didn't strike me overtly watching it, I must admit.
Okay, that's fine. Look, if you didn't notice, you didn't notice. I don't know. It just felt very Donald Duck to me. But that's fine.
Yeah,
there's nothing necessarily too wrong with that either. So is he actually? Frank Welker's done so much stuff over his time. What I know he's done the voice of I think he was Fred in the old Scooby Doo stuff. I think he was Megatron.
The classic cartoon.
Yeah, did he do some old Donald Duck stuff or something, or has he just got a good Donald Duck impression that he kind of went into for this? Frank Welker. No, he's mostly been credited for Scooby Doo across this. Oh, here's a list of some characters he's done. I don't see Donald Duck in there immediately. He was Megatron.
It'd be a logic.
Though. No, so
see how he got there.
He just sort of maybe lightly inspired by.
But I mean, it's an obvious inspiration, isn't it? I think that's. I can see how that happened if that is what happened.
Yes. Oh wait a second. Yeah, Abu. He also did the Tiger. He also did Raja. There you go. Fun. So anyway, we talked about a lot of this. We talked about so much of this stuff. Oh, I'm glad I covered so much of this without actually referring to the notes, because that was going to help speed this up massively, Chris. We got to talk about how they animate the magic carpet. How amazing is that? Brilliant. How much character do they give him?
Spectacular. Yeah, so much character. It's one of the most fleshed out characters in the damn thing. It's brilliant.
Yeah, it really blew me away how good that was. I like the wait, what's the? Oh yeah, the whole sequence, and we haven't really talked about this. The whole sequence where the genie explains to Aladdin, that because Aladdin asks him what he'd wish for, and he'd be like, "Oh, no one's ever asked me that before," and that's quite a sweet moment, and it does a lot for their friendship going forward, because it shows Aladdin doesn't really see Genie as his I'm not the dynamic is immediately by that line no longer master and genie, they're friends because Aladdin's asking him his opinion, and that's different to the kind of people who usually find and use the lamp, who are seeking power and stuff, and it's what separates Aladdin from the genie's previous owners. And even then, even with all that in mind, Genie still doesn't sound 100% convinced that Aladdin's gonna set him free.
It happened so early. I was really, because I remembered that plot point, obviously, and I was taken aback at how early they basically get out the cave and have that conversation, and I'm like, oh wow, and I suppose you need to set it up early so you can have Aladdin be hurt. The genie be hurt later when he implies he's not going to stick to that promise, as it were. So I think you probably do need it at that point, but it comes so early.
Yeah, it does. Because also the genie tells him to be himself really early too.
Yeah, that I don't mind so
sees
much.
the inherent value in Aladdin and is immediately like, you're pretending to be a prince and I'm doing that because, that's your wish and all, but like, just be yourself. That whole sequence where he's literally being a bee, be yourself, is great. It's funny. We already talked about this. Oh, I had the big question of do they fall in love too easily, but we've covered that. And the music being great. Oh, how dramatic is the drowning scene? For those who don't remember, the sequence where Jafar throws Aladdin off a cliff and he can't speak, so the genie needs him to wish to be saved, and the way they animate him going limp is deeply upsetting. I do not care for it. Well, I know it's great, but it's terrible. It's upsetting. I don't like it. It makes me feel sad, but also very tense. I assume you felt the same way.
Yeah, completely. I thought that was very powerful.
Quick question for you, Chris. Say you're a sorcerer, and you've hypnotized the Sultan to wed you to his daughter, and you're thinking, this isn't evil enough. I think I'm going to add some showmanship to this. What I'm going to do, I'm going to have the Sultan framed in an open door, and I'm going to stand behind the closed half of the door for a dramatic reveal, so that the Sultan can say, I've chosen a suitor, and when she questions who, what, why, dramatically open the door and be like, Jafar, and reveal him. He's a bad guy, but he does have a good sense of drama, doesn't he?
Yeah, I mean that is the one thing, isn't it? He doesn't have a villain song, but he is probably the most obvious bad guy in Disney animation history.
Absolutely, he is.
Magic isn't necessarily, apart from the magic of friendship, magic isn't necessarily a thing in this world. But if I saw some dude walking around with a glowing staff, I'd be like, I assume he's mind controlling people.
Yeah, glowing staff with the shape of a snake. Come on.
Yeah. Little on the nose.
Yeah. And the outfit as well. Come on. Yeah. Everyone else is in bright colours. He's the only character in like really dark clothes. Anyway, one thing I do think is brushed over a little too quickly in the movie, and I get it. You got it. The movie's got to move at a clip, but the Sultan just believes Aladdin instantly. Aladdin hands the Sultan the staff and goes, "He's been controlling you with this," and the Sultan goes, "Guards, arrest him!" I'm just like, wait a minute. You're just gonna believe this guy that walked in off the street over your trusted advisor? You're not even going to take 1 second to go, is this true, Jafar? Like, I just...
And
really?
again, in reality, you'd probably be like, oh, man, I'm such a dick. Why did I notice that?
Well, yeah, exactly. That's the thing, is that's almost the movie accounting for Jafar being so obviously evil, because the Sultan just goes, oh, shit, yeah, he is, isn't he? All right, guards.
Yeah. It needs to kind of... That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. I've got... I can't say how much I love this line, so I put it in my notes just because it's so good. It's delivered beautifully by Robin Williams, which is after Aladdin finds out he's potentially going to be Sultan now and realizes that he's cheated his way into this and this isn't right, and he's having doubts about it, and he decides he can't let the genie go yet because he doesn't think he can do it without him. He thinks he's nothing without the lamp, and he says he can't set him free. And the genie gets upset with him and says this incredible line, and it's just so it's so well written. It's, after all, you've lied to everyone else. I was beginning to feel left out.
That was very good. Great line.
What a great line. And I know Robin Williams ad-libbed a bunch of his stuff. I don't think that one was an ad-lib. I think that was written, if I was guessing.
Oh yeah, it feels very, purposeful. Yeah. I would say so. Yeah. I would guess, rather.
Yes. So let's talk about how Jafar is defeated, because it's one of my favourite things in the movie.
Well, it's genius, and I think you feel it coming, but it's so clever, it's so interwoven. He is beaten by his own ambition for power, and his inability to think through consequences. And I just love the way, he grows and everything looks doomed and defeated, even though I imagine if you watch it as a young kid and you don't know what his plan is, that's all just so excited because he's clearly got a plan. And then the way the cup appears, I think they should do more. Like, and I assume, there's literally a movie called The Return of Jafar. So I assume this is what happens. But I feel they should be a bit like, well, Genie, you got out the cave, so maybe do a bit more to like stop anyone rubbing this lamp. But I think it makes so much sense. And again, I think it's how they get away with that ending. That third act being 10 minutes long because they've laid the groundwork of all of that, both in a plot sense and a character sense. So
yeah, and even down to how it's done, like jokingly, because the line the genie says earlier in the movie is phenomenal cosmic power, itty bitty living space. So he does that line, and then Aladdin echoes it to Jafar as his final, phenomenal cosmic power. And he zoops into the lamp. Itty bitty living space. It's great. It's just such a good payoff, and it's been set up so well, even down to what Aladdin says being a callback. Really well done. Really, really well done. And I love Iago getting pulled into the lamp too. That's also just fun, just because that's just a silly idea. Let me ask you a question, Chris. We've talked about the end and the weirdness of. Just there. Oh, I'll just change the law. Oh, great! You could have done that at the beginning. Cool. But let's talk about the genie for a second. Aladdin sets the genie free. How does this work? I don't understand. Does he not just turn into sort of a person? He's still got the powers. It seems he's jumping around. He's using magic. He's flying. He's wearing he's pulled out a Goofy hat from the future in another realm. Again. Early 90s. He's packing his bag, which is weird because he seems to be packing it with things that he's pulling out of thin air. So if he can store them in thin air, why is he packing a bag? I guess it's symbolic. It's a symbolic bag. I don't get it. If Jafar turned into a big red genie thing when he became a genie, should the genie have turned into a person at the end? Is my point.
I think so. And I think it's one way again where I think the remake nailed that as well. The notion of the frame they kept the frame working device, and the notion is, it's spoilers, it's the man telling the tale is the former genie who's now a man, and they obviously had the time to give him a bit of a love story as well, and I think that's cleaner than this weird sort of the genie's still magic, it's just they're free. Because it's like, okay, well, in that case, maybe the genie should stick around and do some magic to, I don't know, get them a fancy wedding. Well, I suppose he thinks they're in love and happy. But I think it's much cleaner if he becomes a man with no powers.
No, less sequel opportunity, though.
Nah, not really. You find an excuse for some shit happens. Someone manages to get the lamp. Jafar has to give them 3 wishes, and they wish for the genie to get his genie powers back.
And be blue again.
Yeah. So I think that's, there are ways around that. Or a genie's powers come back when the world's in trouble. Like, you could dismiss it with one line if you want. Like,
yeah, I suppose. Yeah, you can. It's true. So Aladdin essentially ends up rich and married to the princess at the end. Should we have something to show he's helping Agrabah? Should we have a line?
Yeah, because he does. I mean, he does lie to her. Like, he lies to her throughout, and he gets everything he wanted. I think some sort of. I don't think they need to necessarily have him atone for lying. I don't know how you can do that without implying it's not like that they don't really love each other or some shit like that. But you could have. Let's see something of those values of giving the bread to the kids is how he's going to rule.
Yeah, I'm going to redistribute wealth in Agrabah.
Yeah,
even if the line was just, and Sultan, once the wedding's over, we needed to have a little talk about the distribution of wealth in Agrabah. We could help a lot of people. We got a lot of money up here in the palace.
Yeah, we see him take some of that money or take stuff from the palace, or maybe there's a scene in the palace where there's loads of food and it's them on the magic carpet, singing and distributing it across the land, and they, you still have that romantic last scene, but what they're doing rather than just sort of drifting into the stars is they're distributing the food.
Yes,
is maybe a clean way of doing it.
Yeah, perfect. All right, well, so big recommend. Obviously, it's Aladdin. It's a classic. It is not perfect, but it's pretty close for a movie of its time. It's really good. And the movie of its timeline is not about the quality, but about the depictions we talked about earlier. If you're able to work past those, I think this is still one of the better. And maybe I think it might still be my favorite of the classic animated Disney era movies.
Yeah, for sure. It's amazing. It's brilliant. It's just so much fun. Like I watched it really late last night, and there's you watch a film that late because it's been busy and we were getting up early to do this and stuff. There's always an element of like, oh god, I'm going to be watching this till like 1:30 in the morning. But
no, we watched this almost exactly in sync then, because that's what happened.
Oh, really?
I finished around 1:30.
It's just so much fun though. I got really swept up in it. So yeah,
absolutely. So did I.
Watch Aladdin. Let's triv it up.
I'm gonna give you some trivia. First of all, very quickly, this isn't trivia. Just want to put this out there. Disney Plus. When the movie finishes, please suggest the sequel, Return of Jafar, not the live action one. No one's gonna finish this movie and immediately watch the remake, even if they like the remake.
Yeah, that's fair.
It's the same movie. Not the same, but you know what I mean. Anyway.
Yeah. It would be a weird choice.
It's a weird choice. So, let's talk about some alternate casting very quickly. Tim Curry, Kelsey Grammer, John Hurt, Christopher Lloyd, and Ian McKellen were all considered for the role of Jafar. I've realised I've done that in the wrong order because you didn't know which role when I was saying the names. So very quickly, Tim Curry, Kelsey Grammer, John Hurt, Christopher Lloyd and Ian McKellen were alternates for Jafar. They actually offered it to Patrick Stewart, but due to scheduling conflicts with Star Trek The Next Generation, he had to turn down the role. He said in interviews past, this is one of his biggest regrets. That would have been fun. I love the performance that we've got in this movie from Jonathan Freeman. I personally would not change that, but I do get the idea that Patrick Stewart would do it would be good.
Yeah, I think Patrick Stewart would have been great to hear. I love what we got, but I'd step into the Rick and Morty gun and watch that.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Rick and Morty. If anyone doesn't get that, we early on in this podcast when we started talking about alternate casting, we said like if you could get a Rick and Morty portal gun, go to an alternate dimension that's exactly the same, but that casting happened differently, and see that version of the movie, would you? Yes. I definitely want to check one of those out. I think it'd be fun. Iago had a couple of different potential voice actors before they hired Gilbert Gottfried, one of which was Danny DeVito, one of which was Joe Pesci. Now, DeVito obviously then got to do it. He came back with not that role, but he came back to Disney to play a sort of fun sort of like comedic side character in a big Disney movie just shortly after this, because he was in Hercules, which is one of my other favorite Disney movies from this era. He's great in that, so big thumbs up. I would have absolutely enjoyed Danny DeVito in that role. I'm glad we got what we got. Obviously Gilbert Gottfried is a legend. Joe Pesci I'm less convinced of personally, but yeah. So they always had Robin Williams in mind for the genie. They were thinking of him when they were writing the role, but they were concerned he wouldn't want to do the project. He hadn't really done much in animation except for Fern Gully, and the reason he'd made the exception for Fern Gully was because of its environmental message, which meant a lot to Robin Williams. He was a very big environmentalist at the time, which is crazy because that's like what Fern Gully, 80, 89, 90 or something like that. It's 2022. We're still having to try and tell people that it's a problem. Like I just, that's exhausting. Anyway, we never learn. But while they were figuring that out and trying to convince him to do that, other names were considered. Albert Brooks, John Candy, Matt Frewer, John Goodman, Steve Martin, Eddie Murphy, and Martin Short. Now, Eddie Murphy, another similar to Danny DeVito, did get to do a sort of comedic Disney side character at a later date. They brought him in to do the character of Mushu in Mulan. A really fun role, probably one of the better parts of that movie. I like that movie, but that character really is very entertaining. I don't think I want any of those though for this movie.
No, but I mean, it is. I mean, it's so hard, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? It's like turning around and going, Who else do you think could have been the Dark Knight? Could have been the Joker in the Dark Knight. Like you just, it's so iconic. It's so tied to him that it's. Of course, you can't see anyone else in that role.
Yeah. Well, to convince Robin to come on board, what they did before they approached him, because they were so worried he was going to say no, the Eric Goldberg, one of the animators, put together animation. He animated a whole sequence of the genie to several minutes of Robin Williams stand-up. So he got some bits from one of the albums, I think it's called Reality, What a Concept, and animated the genie to it, and then screened it for Williams. He was so impressed that he signed on almost immediately.
Oh, brilliant.
So that's really fun. I like that's how they did it. That's clever.
And then the tale took a turn when when what happened?
Yeah, we teased it. We should cover it, right? Okay. So obviously, Robin Williams provided the voice for the genie. He actually agreed to do it at union scale rate, which is the lowest amount you can legally pay an actor for their work. The proviso on this was, I'm not going to take a big chunky on movie's budget. I'm going to do this for basically no money. The only thing you have to do is, I don't want to see a ton of merchandise. I don't want to see toys at Burger King and McDonald's with the genie's face on it. I don't want the genie character to take up more than 25% of the space on the poster or the ads or the billboards or the trailers. I don't want my name to be first in the credits. I don't want all these things. None of that happened. Disney marketed the shit out of the genie. He was huge on the poster. They basically broke every single promise they made. And it's the reason he took such a huge pay cut. So when these wishes were not met, he withdrew his support for Disney and the film. His name was not allowed to be included in the Art of Aladdin book that they released. Instead, it makes references to the voice of the genie. He was then not willing to come back for the sequel, Return of Jafar, or the TV show. And that's when Dan Castellaneta stepped in. In an attempt to get back on good terms with Williams, Disney CEO Michael Eisner apologized publicly, and as a peace offering, sent him an original Pablo Picasso painting. Still angered and betrayed, Williams would not accept the gift and returned it, which is crazy. It's a Picasso. That's madness. But,
yeah, wow. Fair play to him.
He held it up. It wasn't until Jeffrey Katzenberg, who was a chairman at Disney, was replaced by Joe Roth that Williams made his peace with Disney. So basically, the architect of the problem was Katzenberg, it seems, or at least in Williams' eyes. I'm not really sure. Obviously, I don't know the details. Made peace with Disney after that, though. A public apology, promises to right the wrongs. Williams was so touched eventually, once Joe Roth reached out to him, that he did finally sort of agree to come back, and he did actually agree to do the third sequel, King of Thieves. At that point, they had already recorded all the dialogue for it with Dan Castellaneta. So Dan Castellaneta's dialogue, of course, immediately all thrown out, and was replaced by Robin Williams. I will be very interested at some point if we can go look at that movie, because if Castellaneta recorded it all first, and they were already halfway through animating the movie, could they have done what they did here with all the crazy genie energy, like having his recordings first? I wonder if that will be noticeably different, knowing Robin Williams came on board the project later. So yeah,
have you seen that movie? Is it any good? Is it the same sort of energy and
I'll be honest, I haven't seen it in my adult life, but I loved it as a kid. But I wonder if that was the nostalgia for this movie winning me over. I remember really enjoying it. I think it's better than Return of Jafar. Was my memory of it, was because Return of Jafar was kind of like a pilot for a TV show they were looking to launch, which they then did. Whereas it felt like King of Thieves, or whatever it's called. Is that what it's called? I think it's called King of Thieves. Yeah. Was clearly a designed like movie, like sequel. They wanted to do it. It's interesting, isn't it? I think he's right to have been mad. That's really crappy. From
Yeah.
Disney.
Oh, for sure. Like he took a pay cut for. Like I think he'd have a right to be mad if those were his stipulations and there wasn't a pay cut associated with it. Like the fact that his stipulation for a pay cut was "don't make it all about me" says so much about the man.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think not only the pay cut, I mean, there's a difference between taking a pay cut and going for scale. Scale is like the legal limit, the minimum you can physically be paid. It's not just a pay cut. He basically took no money. Like, that would have been nothing for Robin Williams at the time. Absolutely nothing. So, yeah, absolutely mad that they did that because they got such a good deal out of it. If anyone wants to know more about that situation in general, there's a really great video essay by Lindsay Ellis. It's only like 23 minutes long, and it talks about how the movie also kind of ruined animation forever, because following this movie, everyone was trying to get big named stars that weren't necessarily trained like specifically as voice actors into their animated movies. And you get these movies now, like like Sing or whatever, and they're like promoting the movie. I'm like, oh, we've got, like Seth MacFarlane and Matthew McConaughey and Reese Witherspoon doing voices of cute animals. Like it's even like things like the Bee Movie or whatever that was primarily put around, Will Smith. Oh no, sorry, Will Smith. Jerry Seinfeld or Will Smith in Shark's Tale. Like it's all of that happened because of this, and Robin Williams saw it coming.
There's just something about it just really makes me laugh. You being like specifically using the phrase is bit like when I think of big stars, like I don't know, I think of like iconic stars, I guess.
Yeah,
like Brad
I know what
Pitt.
you're going to say.
I don't think of Reese Witherspoon and Matthew McConaughey as great as they are.
But like the idea of like putting names in your animated movie. Like it's Shark's Tale being launched on Will Smith. It happens because of Aladdin.
You know what I think the bigger modern example is when I think of The Secret Life of Pets. I don't think about the movie. I think about Kevin Hart and The Rock doing press junkets.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Even the first Despicable Me movie, Steve Carell.
Yeah.
Coming off The Office, like. It just, I don't know, or Shrek having like Donkey, like Eddie Murphy, like I don't know. It started a trend, and I think if they'd have done what Robin Williams asked and not promoted it against his wishes, then that might not have spun off when it did. It might have eventually happened, but yeah. So there you go. So yeah, sorry, I was saying Lindsay Ellis has a really great little documentary about it. There's a video essay, I should say, on it on her channel. She doesn't post anymore, but it's called "How Aladdin Changed Animation by Screwing Over Robin Williams." It's a great little video, really, really worth doing. Right, so really interesting. So this is obviously loosely based on the original short story from Arabian Nights. Interestingly, in its original form, the story was set in China. So it's quite a shift. So yeah, there are many plot elements obviously created just for the films, such as Jafar's interactions with Jasmine, framing Aladdin for a crime, all that stuff. All part of this. Plot elements that are quite similar, though. Obviously, some of the plot elements that have come into this that aren't from Arabian Nights. A lot of them are taken from the Count of Monte Cristo, so it's just like an amalgam of the two stories, which is funny because the Count of Monte Cristo references Arabian Nights multiple times. So yeah, that's the origins of it. It's that original tale mashed up with Count of Monte Cristo. And again, I think that weird element that it was because it's from the book Arabian Nights. They felt the need to set it like that, even though in the book Arabian Nights it's set in China. It's very strange. Really strange. Anyway, so let's run through the rest of these because there's so much, and I'm conscious of time now. So originally Jafar was a more hot-tempered character, while Iago was a cool, haughty British type. The filmmakers felt Jafar losing his temper too much made him lose his menacing nature, so they switched the personalities basically. Not one for one.
Was the right call.
Was the right call. He was also Jasmine was also supposed to be a bit more active in the original version. At one point, she was supposed to confront the Sultan and angrily declare, "We have to talk." But the animators had to nix it because they didn't have the budget to design the set and space and animation for an entirely new space that they needed to have the conversation in. So they had to fall back on showing Jasmine crying instead, which they've claimed since made them cringe, and they didn't like it. Also, when Jasmine was trapped in the hourglass, she was actually supposed to use the jewel from her headpiece to smash herself free. They had to change this last minute again for budgetary reasons. That is a real shame.
Yeah, that is the hourglass thing in particular is a real shame.
Yeah, I think so too. Aladdin was originally fully aware that Jasmine was the princess from the minute they met. This was changed because the production team felt it implied Aladdin fell in love with her because of her money and power, not because he genuinely cared about her. Agreed. Good choice. Mm-hmm. Howard Ashman and Alan Menken conceived the opening song Arabian Night to be a recurring song throughout the film, acting as narration. The idea was, however, dropped when the visuals and storytelling proved so strong that they were sufficient to tell the story in their own right. Also, good choice. Mm-hmm. 8 other songs were written for the film but were later cut. Some of the original songs before the story was rewritten and half the characters were cut. There was a big shift at some point in production. But Proud of You Boy was supposed to be sung by Aladdin's mother, who was originally planned to be in the movie but was then removed from the story. There's a song called Call Me a Princess, which is, I believe, obviously a Jasmine song. There was Humiliate the Boy, sung by Jafar, cut because it was considered too cruel for the film. High Adventure and Count on Me. Count on Me was something Aladdin sang to his friends and family, but was eventually weirdly replaced in the story by A Whole New World. I don't know how that works. Several of them did make their way back into the stage musical, including Proud of Your Boy and High Adventure. So there you go. Cool. Layout supervisor Razul Azadani, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, travelled to his hometown, Isfahan. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, in Iran in 1991 to get a feel for the look of the film. He took nearly 2,000 pictures there. His name was supposed to be the incantation Jafar used when he approached the Cave of Wonders, but the idea was written out so not to be so much of an in-joke. However, in Aladdin 2, Return of Jafar, the captain of the guards, who is nameless in this movie, gets named after him, Razul. So that's nice. Credit to the guy for his work.
That's
nice. Let's see. In the Cave of Wonders. Oh, this is a cool idea. It's a shame this didn't make it into the movie. In the Cave of Wonders, there was supposed to have been an extended version of the lamp grabbing scene. Aladdin would have approached the lamp before he could grab it. He would look up and see the image of others, including Gazim from the beginning of the movie, who attempted to take the lamp and were killed. So he'd see a list of people who died attempting to get the lamp that weren't fit, and he backs away. And it turns out that that lamp had been fake, and by stepping away from it, he was then granted access to the real one by showing he wasn't so
that's
greedy.
a nice idea.
Lovely idea. Shame it couldn't fit into the movie, time and production-wise. Originally, the peddler who introduces the movie was supposed to be the genie. We've already talked about that, so I'm going to just move straight on. Even though Scott Winger, who played Aladdin, and Linda Larkin, who played Jasmine, are good singers, they did not sing for their respective characters. Brad Kane did Aladdin's singing voice, while Leah Salonga did Jasmine's singing. It's mostly pretty seamless, except for Aladdin. I think in The Whole New World really stands out for me whenever I hear it, but maybe that's just because I know. We've already talked about this, but there's some more detail here. So during the course of the recordings, the late Robin Williams obviously improvised many of his lines. They had about 16 hours of material. Because he ad-libbed so many of his lines, the script actually got rejected for Best Adapted Screenplay at the Oscars because, quite frankly, they were like, you didn't write a screenplay. Robin Williams improvised half your dialogue. The opening scene with the street merchant was entirely unscripted. He was brought into a soundstage and asked to just stand behind a table that had several objects on it. There was initially a bedsheet covering them all. They just whipped the bedsheet off, and without looking, he was picking up objects and just describing them in character. But apparently, most of the material in that recording session was not appropriate for a Disney movie, so they used the bits they had that were. That's great. Robin Williams recorded most of his scenes between filming breaks on Hook and Toys, but after finishing Hook, Williams frequently, this is one of my favourites, Williams frequently received calls from Spielberg, who had moved on to his next movie, the Holocaust movie, Schindler's List. He would put Robin Williams on speakerphone so he could tell jokes to the cast and crew to cheer them up. Some of the material that he used was material that he was using for Aladdin.
Wow. God.
Well, it's that. What I love most about that is obviously Spielberg just worked with Robin, and I love that they kept that friendship up, like to the closeness where he could just call Robin while on set of his next movie.
Yeah, but you're not picturing it, man. Picture the cast of Schindler's List stood on that set while Steven Spielberg holds a phone in the air, and Robin Williams spouts jokes and Aladdin dialogue at them. Like, it's insanity. It's brilliant.
Yeah, it's a really good.
I want it as a
trivia.
painting.
Yeah, 100% agree. Yeah, I mean, I feel like normally we'd spin off into a several-minute conversation speculating on what that was like, but I'm conscious of time. So I'm gonna move.
No, I don't think I want to. I just want everyone to picture it, and whatever your version of that is in your head is the right version.
Yeah, agreed. In previous screenings of this movie, audiences did not applaud after the big song numbers. The animators wanted applause, so one of them snuck in the applause sign over the genie after Friend Like Me, which is lovely. Yeah, I just think that's fun. When Iago pulls a picture of him and Jafar out of his cage, the line, "And how about this picture? I don't know. I think I'm making a weird face in it," was apparently entirely ad-libbed by Gilbert Gottfried. And when Robin Williams heard it, he could not stop laughing. Very sadly, those two didn't actually get to work together on this movie. They knew each other from the comedy circuit and they'd met, but sadly they didn't get to be in the same room at any point. But that's hilarious.
That's brilliant.
It's a good line. There's a list here of the genie's celebrity impressions, which I think is kind of funny to read through because it's mad, but I covered a lot of them earlier, actually, so let's not do that. But let's instead... I've got a list here of impressions that he recorded, but were cut from the movie. These are even weirder. Some of them I don't know, some of them I do. But John Wayne, George Bush, Sir Alec Guinness, Billy Burke, Wolfman Jack, Dr. Ruth Westheimer, Richard Nixon, Michael Jackson, Matthew Lillard, Marlon Brando, Curly Howard, Elvis Presley, W.C. Fields, Bing Crosby, dear Lord, I got there in the end, Don King, Fred Rogers, Edward G. Robinson, and John Wayne. I think I might have already said John Wayne, though. This list might have John Wayne in it twice. But there you go. That's a big list of people.
Really, it really was Robin Williams just doing stand-up for... for hours, wasn't it?
Yeah, it really was. A fun little animation detail: whenever Aladdin tells a lie, the big purple feather on the front of his turban falls and covers his face. That's
cool.
Nice. Aladdin throws Jasmine an apple several times throughout the movie, but when they're flying over Greece and he does it, that's a bit more meaningful because in ancient Greece, throwing an apple to a woman was considered a marriage proposal. So it can be argued that that's the moment Aladdin is proposing to Jasmine.
Oh, that's sweet.
Yeah. Aladdin's monkey Abu was named after the ancient Egyptian city of Abu. This actually translates to elephant because the city was known for its trade in ivory. Therefore, it's not that surprising that when enchanted, Abu shapeshifts into an elephant. I think that's a fun little detail. I like that.
Agreed.
Was the most successful film of 1992, grossing $217 million in the United States and over $504 million worldwide. Biggest gross of an animated feature at the time, until Lion King came along 2 years later and beat it, which was a shame. This was the first full-length animated film to gross over $200 million in the United States and Canada. Big success.
There you go. Nice.
Mm-hmm. None of that money went to Robin Williams because he took nothing for this. Disney are bastards. When Robin Williams passed away in 2014, Disney actually honoured him that week by airing Aladdin on their 3 Disney children's channels, Disney Channel, Disney XD, and Disney Junior. They aired it across 3 days, twice on each channel. And at the end of the movie, just before the credits, would put up an image that read, "In memory of Robin Williams, who made us laugh." And animator Eric Goldberg did a tribute to him, drew something, and they put that as the backdrop. I've not actually seen that image. I should have Googled it beforehand, but it sounds lovely.
Yeah, that's very sweet. It's very nice.
Jonathan Friedman, who voiced Jafar, this is the last one. I should clarify, actually, there isn't a Cars Exist this week because there are no cars in this movie. Well, that's a lie, actually. There is one car in this movie, very briefly, when he's clicking his fingers and turning Abu into different modes of transport. One of them is a car, but it's not specifically any car. It's just a very generic car with Abu eyes.
I wondered if you were going to do Carpets Exist.
Well, if I had any sort of information about the carpet... But what trivia would I then do? Man, there's a magic carpet in the movie. Sadly, the carpet in this movie is not does not have any specific trivia.
No, that is a shame. What were you going to say?
Sorry, the very last one, very last bit of trivia. Jonathan Freeman, who voiced Jafar, ended up playing the live-action version of the character in the Broadway musical and continued the role up until January 2022. That was 11 months ago. He stopped. Wow.
God. You're kidding. How long did he do it for?
When did he... Yeah, that's a really good question. When did he start? When did he do it? Because, like, if he took a massive gap and only started doing it in, like, 2018 or something, that's less impressive. Let's see. That's
insane.
Isn't that great? I do love that he did that.
No, it's phenomenal.
Oh... This doesn't say.
Let's see if it's here.
I can't find the date that he started. I can find the date he left because someone did a big article about him leaving the show. His final performance was January 23rd this year. But when did he start?
Well, according to this, he's in the original Broadway cast. So,
fuck off.
And it came out. It came out in 2011. So,
I mean, you know what? Fair play. Absolutely fair play. And look, I've seen some pictures of him in costume. He looks great. That's very good. And he looks like he's
Jonathan Freeman had reprised his role of Jafar from the original film. He departed the cast in 2022. That implies he did it for 11 years.
Wow. Fair play.
That is phenomenal.
What a hero. What an absolute hero. There you go. So yeah, that's all the triv. Wow. So that was longer than I thought it would be, but there's a fair bit to talk about with this movie. It's got a big history.
For sure.
And also, whenever it's a really, really popular movie, there's always a ton of triv because there's loads of people like asking people who were involved in the movie about it. Well, you can always tell when a movie had no real cultural impact when I get to the triv and I've got like 10 pieces of triv because no one cares enough to even have investigated or asked the people who worked on it what that experience was. So there's just no information. It might have interesting triv, but we'll never know. You know, that sometimes happens.
In terms of where we're going next, I mean, we've teased it a lot. We've basically revealed it, but also I think it is an incredibly appropriate choice because in many ways it's my equivalent. This is the film that I could have recited off by heart when it came out, and I finally got it on video. A story I shall tell next week. It's very much the film that I adored in that way, and could, you know, a lot of the stuff you said about Aladdin applies. So we're finally doing it, people. The season 5 finale, I think. The season 5 finale of Rewind Reviews will be us finally sitting down to tackle Good Burger.
I'm a dude.
The film.
She's
the
a
film
dude.
which
He's
behind
a dude.
me.
Because we're all dudes. Hey,
I'm a dude. Behind me now sits a £90 poster.
I should clarify for American listeners, he means pounds money, not pounds weight.
Yes, yeah. So
£90 poster. Well, I've seen this poster in real life. It's fucking massive. It is huge.
Let me do. Hold on. So pounds to dollars. So of today's money, which obviously, you know, the pound is not worth much at the moment, but still, it's $111 I spent on a poster.
But no, but I just meant people didn't. I want people to think you meant weight, because obviously in America they do pounds by weight.
No, I know. I'm just clarifying the equivalent.
Right. It's an expensive poster, and it's massive. I mean, it is. It's huge, but it is the poster of the movie Good Burger. So I am quite excited that we're doing this. I absolutely, with no evidence, rhyme or reason, hold the opinion that this movie holds up.
Yes, and I'm looking forward to seeing if that's correct, because there's a lot riding on it. We promised absolute bangers for the last 4, and so far we've been 3 for 3. So
yeah, we said we'd do nothing but good movies for the last couple, and we're being very bold, I think, choosing Good Burger, because I think on paper there's a chance this might not be great. But my memory of it is so strong that I'm convinced it's still going to be a good movie. So yeah, next week we're doing that. I'm very excited about it. Thank you, Chris, for choosing it, because I could never choose this movie. I know how much this movie means to you. There have been times when I've wondered about choosing this movie, but I cannot take that moment away from Chris. He has to select it. So thank you for doing so. I'm very excited to watch it again after all this time. It's been a while. I think the last time I watched it was maybe college. I maybe went back to it during college or uni, maybe.
I don't know.
But I'm very excited to give it another try. So, we'll come back next week for that. In the meantime, in fact, well, actually, you don't need to wait a week. If you're currently listening to this on, like, Spotify or, like, iTunes, and you listen to it for free, like a chump, well, guess what? For as little as $1 a month, you can hear us discuss Good Burger right now. And I'm going to roll all of my R's. No, I'm not going to do that anymore. That was bad. But you can do that. You can listen to it right now on patreon.com/nothingbutstatic. You can also interact with the show in many ways. You can give us a comment on the YouTube channel. You can email us at mail@nothingbutstatic.co.uk. You can go to your podcast app of choice. You know, the ones I just called lame because you're not paying and supporting us that way. I probably shouldn't have done that because... please keep listening. But yeah, you can.
Please, pretty please.
But you can listen to us on iTunes and all those places. But all those places also have review systems, and if you review, rate, poke, like, star, whatever their system is, it tells that app that you like what you're listening to, and then it will more likely share it to others with the algorithm. TM. So please interact with us in any way you can on those platforms. That also supports the show. The other way you can support the show is by telling a friend, and the final way, of course, you can continue to support the show is by continuing to listen. We like that too. If that is the limit to your interaction with us, if that is where you're just like, that's all I'm willing and interested in doing, wonderful. We're very, very grateful to have you. So
we
with
very
all that
much
said,
appreciate it.
Yes, 100%. So with all that said, I'm going to hand over to Chris, who wraps up this podcast, and I'm going to do it in a way that doesn't seem like I was about to do it and then remembered.
No, I didn't get that vibe at all. No. I'm Chris Billingham.
I'm Dan Doohan.
And this review has been rewound.
We really should have saved the I'm joke for when we're going to do Jurassic Park.
I can't. I hate when we do alternatives. I'm doing it again. I'm Chris Billingham.
I'm Dan Doohan.
And this review has been rewound.
Wow.
I fucking hate when we vary it. Bye.
Bye. I love it.